Welcome in, guys. If you are just signing in now, please complete the pre-workshop survey that is up on Zoom. And we'll be using that to help inform this conversation as well as to make sure that this workshop was effective for you guys. If you guys don't know me yet, my name is Joanne. I'm the program director for GPS STEM, Graduate Professional Success for STEM PhDs and postdocs. And we do these types of workshops inviting folks from industry, non-traditional academic backgrounds to help teach skill sets that you typically don't learn within the lab setting, and this is one of them. So this particular event, we really focus in on helping PhDs, postdocs, researchers with the essential skills of project management and procrastination mitigation, in particular to help you guys be successful in your PhD programs and your research or whatever else you're looking forward to down the line. And hopefully by the end of this event, you guys will be able to have a better understanding of project management principles, some effective techniques, as well as some tools and resources to be able to help you through project management and mitigation of procrastination. So I'm happy to be able to introduce our speaker today and our workshop facilitator. And again, reminder for folks who are just hopping in, please complete the pre-workshop survey. So for our speaker today, we are joined by Dr. Kimberly Duong. She is a civil engineer, project manager, and productivity career coach, especially for PhD students. She has 10 plus years of project management, leadership, STEM outreach, and mentorship experience in academia, government, nonprofits, and entrepreneurship. Incredibly well-rounded and diverse in terms of her background. And in fact, some of her experiences have brought her to overseas in Melbourne, Australia for wetlands field work, Washington, D.C. for science policy work, and so much more. So she received her master's and PhD in civil and environmental engineering from UC Irvine and BS in atmospheric sciences from UCLA. There's more information about her on her website, and I'll link that in the chat in a bit. And she's been featured on a couple other podcasts if you're interested to take a deeper dive into self-development, professional development. And I will now go ahead and pass it to Dr. Duong.
Okay, thank you, Joanne, and thank you for everyone who came. I'm so excited to be here and to chat with all of you. I really want this workshop to be super engaging, so leave comments in the chat, unmute. I have polls coming up, and I'll have plenty of chances for people to ask questions and volunteer, so lots of chances for engagement. As a coach, as a PhD coach, I work one-on-one with PhD students, and I provide tailored tools and advice. Today, we're going to talk about some general tools to help you manage your PhD with project management tools and to combat your procrastination. And if you enjoyed this workshop and you're interested in working with me one-on-one, I'll be staying on after the workshop to answer any questions about coaching. And if you can't stay until the end, that's no problem. You can also email me separately to talk about how coaching works. So I'm going to leave the pre-workshop survey up for a bit. But I think in maybe 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to close it because we do have more polls coming up. Our agenda today is packed with actionable information so you can better manage your research projects and your procrastination. So first, we'll talk about some project management tools that you can start using today, and these will help you stay organized and your future selves will thank you for it. And then we'll talk about 3 common reasons for procrastination and how to address each one of them. Then we'll do a little activity. I'll ask some volunteers to share what they came up with. And then we have time for an open Q&A session. During this time, I'll also give you some space to fill out the post-workshop survey about your experience today. And one randomly chosen survey respondent will receive a $20 Amazon gift card from me. So make sure that you get your surveys in post-workshop and spell your email addresses right. So let's begin. Okay. First topic is project management tools for PhD students. And project management is all about making sure that the work is getting done efficiently, effectively, on time, on budget, and as smoothly as possible. Even if you don't have title of project manager, your PhD is your project, and you are the project manager. One phenomenon that I've observed is that when we have no structure in place to manage projects, this is what usually happens, this Venn diagram of thinking and doing. We might do one step and then stop to think, oh, what should I do next? And then we try something else, and then we think some more. And these actions get jumbled together, and that overlap makes it hard to think long term, to think about the bigger picture. And what I'm advocating for today is to separate the thinking and the doing so that when we decide, we think about the big picture, we plan out the steps that need to be taken, and then we implement based on that plan. Of course, there's going to be iteration when we implement and then realize the original plan was flawed. So we go back to the big picture and then we revise the plan. But by separating the thinking from the doing, we don't start and stop every step of the way. So next, we're going to talk about some tools to help you create that structure. And if you haven't yet, there's a pre-workshop survey up. I'll give maybe 1 or 2 minutes left to fill that out if you haven't already. Next slide, we're going to talk about the first tool that you can use for project management for your PhD. This is called a research diary. Now, how many of you have notes for your research in 10 different places? Sticky notes and Post-its, notebooks, online Excel sheets. Give me a thumbs up or a chat in the message if that resonates with you. I can't see everybody, but I do see some responses, and thank you for sharing your thumbs up. A research diary, what I'm advocating for here, is one of the simplest and most effective tools for project management for your PhD. And in this table I'm showing you, it's just a simple table where you're tracking your PhD and your research related activities. The more specific and thorough your entries are, the more that's going to help you and your future self when you go to publish your research or to present at a conference, even preparing for your defense. Now, in this example, I'm showing that we have a few different categories, a few different columns. We have the date, the category of activity, hours spent, and a description. And I'm going to walk through these examples. Any volunteers who want to share how a research diary has helped them, you can use the chat or raise your hand or unmute yourself. And while I wait for that, I'm going to end the pre-workshop survey. So I'm ending the poll right now. Okay, I'm going to walk through some of these examples that you see on the screen. The first is the category of data analysis. Now, if you're in any quantitative or even qualitative research, you may have a lot of data that you need to work with in order to do the analysis that your project is made of. And this is what I mean about being specific. This example shows a list of steps that were used in doing the data analysis. It includes hyperlinks to the file name that you can just click on, a list of steps in order, chronological order that you did them, the variable names. And I know this may look tedious to do at the moment, but you're going to thank yourself when you write the method section of your paper in 1, 2, 3 years, because you're not going to remember that when you go to write that paper later on, or when you go to present at a conference. The second example I'm showing here is about writing. So keeping track of the version of the draft that you're working on, which comments you're pulling from. This is all extremely important, especially when you're collaborating with several co-authors and you get multiple drafts of the same paper. If you've ever gone through a publishing period, you'll understand that you might end up with 3 versions that all say final, but actually they're not final. You need to know and track which of these documents is the one that you need to be working on. So I'll pause here to see if there are any questions so far about this slide before I move on. And don't be shy. I mean, I can't see all of you, but I'm trying to engage and address any questions that we have in the moment. Okay, so I'm seeing none, so I'll move on. And if you have questions later, feel free to jump in anytime. The next slide I'm showing here is different examples. They're not directly related to doing research, but they are still relevant to your PhD. So you might be applying to a fellowship, meeting with your advisor, or attending this workshop right now. And that's all applicable. That's all related to your PhD. When you move offices, that might not happen often, but when it does, it can take hours. It might take half a day. It might take a whole day. Researching a presentation, making edits, you might end a long day of work thinking you didn't get much done. But if you look back on these entries, you might see that you spent an entire day working on the PhD, and you should be proud of that. It's hard to remember when you look back, but this is going to be a reminder for you. Okay, I see a comment in the chat says, how is the research diary useful in retrospect? So that's depending on what stage you're in, it might not come to you yet. But when I was working on my defense, when I was trying to publish papers towards the end of my PhD, I realized I totally forgot how I did my initial set of experiments. And that's not something that you can exactly, remember just by looking at a list of files. But when you look at your research diary, you kind of see the thinking that went into the methods at the time, what you did first, what you tried next, what didn't work. And that's going to refresh your memory. It's also going to give you some starter material for when you're trying to write your methods. You can copy and paste from your research diary and say, okay, this is a super, super rough draft. Let me clean it up a little bit. But it gives you a great starting point, and it's straight from the source, right? It's straight from you from 3 years ago. Okay, great. So any questions about the research diary before I move on? Any other questions?
There's one more from Lindsay and maybe
Okay.
later one from Fariba.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, Lindsay says, what's your recommendation for keeping a research diary when you work with other people? Should you share it? Have them do their own? This is a great question. Personally, I think it's always worth having a version of your research diary that is completely yours. That way it's unfiltered. You don't have to feel like, oh, I shouldn't write this comment because it sounds too simple. No, anything that you want to write, it's a diary. It's for you to use. Now, if you want to share anything that you've produced from the research diary, oftentimes what I'll do is if, say, my advisor asked me for an update, what'd you do this past week? I can easily go into my research diary, copy and paste just one entry that I did. Maybe it was an analysis heavy day, and I can copy paste a list of 1 through 20 steps. And maybe, they don't want that granular of the detail, but if they do, you'll be ready. And you don't even have to spend any time writing up an email, long email about what you did and wondering if you missed anything because you already did that work beforehand. So hopefully Lindsay answered your question. Farba asked, how would it be different from a daily/weekly to-do list? Okay, great question. The research diary can be used as a daily or weekly to-do list. I sometimes put tasks that I plan to do in the following week, but the main purpose is retrospective, is to show what happened, what you ended up doing, what the final version of that file name was, what the analysis was in the end. Sometimes when you're starting to do some analysis, you try things and you realize, oh, that wasn't the right thing. But the research diary is to memorialize what actually happened, what in the end you went with. And we'll also talk about a few other tools here. The next thing I'm talking about is a project task list. That's kind of to track things that are happening right now or upcoming. Okay. And another question, do you have any tips to keep your diary updated? In my experience, I start very well, and the moment I get busier, it all goes out the window. Yes, this is a very common question I get. And the tips is to think of the research diary not as a nice to have, but a need to have. So every day when you wake up, you do a few things and you don't attribute it to motivation, right? You wake up, you drink some water, you brush your teeth, you use the bathroom. None of those things you do because you feel like, oh, I've got some time. Let me do that. Those are just automatic. Those are built in, whether you want to or not, it is an ingrained internal habit. And you know that no matter what the day looks like, you have to start with that. So that's the mentality I have with the research diary. Anytime I'm working on my PhD, bam, the research diary is on the left side. Everything else that I'm working on is on the right. It's just permanently there when I'm working on my PhD. And that way, while I'm working, I can update it. At the end of my, task, I can update it. Before I start, I can start writing some notes. So it's just a matter of building that habit and making sure that you think of this as a non-negotiable. It's an essential part of what you do. That's the only way this is going to be helpful, because if you start it, you work on it for a week, and then you neglect it for 2 years, it's not going to be that helpful to you, right? I see Joanne looking away. Yeah, I know it's hard. Sometimes there have been months I wrote in my entry a few times and I say, LOL, I didn't update this for 3 months. And guess what? The only person that hurts is me. And so the more that you can commit to making this a daily habit, something that if you have only 5 minutes to work on your PhD, this is one of those things that you're going to stick to. And, that's all you can do, is to commit to it and follow through. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide, but if any other questions about research diaries, I'm going to save them to the end so that we can make sure we get through the material. Okay, so the next tool that I have for you is called a project task list. This is another project management tool that I absolutely love. I use this with my students, and this is to track everything that's going on. If the research diary is for documenting the past, then the project task list is for the present. And the task list is to show all of the things that you're working on right now and the current status of each item. So I'm showing several columns that I personally use, but you can tweak them to your own liking. And let's look at some of these examples. So priority means ranking how important this task is. Project is referring to the larger project that this task is nested under. So one project might be a single paper that you're working on, could be a specific set of experiments that are related to one another, or even a conference that you're presenting at. A task is referring to one specific task that needs to be completed. And it could be as small as creating an initial plot or submitting an abstract. The due date is a deadline that's either given to you externally or that you give to yourself. The status column is for briefly describing the current status. And to go along with that, the assignee is the person who is responsible for the next step. So you know that if the assignee is you, your name is there, you know that this task is what you should be working on right now. And sometimes it's another person who's going to do the next step. And what you can do is to remind them of that and to bring it up to them. That's all you can do in the moment. Finally, the column that says done, why, and yes or no. When this task is done, you can change that to why, and you can use filtering to hide it or to sort it away. And most of the tasks that you're working on are going to be shown as an N, and the tasks that are shown as Y, those are going to be, personally, I like to hide them or put them at the bottom so that the things that are highest priority are going to kind of float to the top. Okay. So here's an example, priority A, B, C being high. I like to use color coding, so red, yellow, green, and projects could be conference one, certain lit review, task could be finalizing a draft. And that's all really specific to you. As long as you can understand everything that's going on here, that's enough. You don't have to make it so detailed that anyone else that you work with will understand. This is just for you and your workflow each day. Okay, that was a lot of information. So questions for me on this slide. Okay, I have a question here. How many days are planned for in the project list? So I personally use this as a tool for thinking about everything that I need to do, that I need to work on, even if it's something that I don't think is going to be necessary or due for 3 months from now. And, that's a personal choice for me because the type of work that I do, I have projects that span 10 plus years. I work on very large scale projects, very long-term projects. So for me, something that's 6 months from now, it needs to be on the list. But for you, if you have a project that is, maybe only going to take 2 months, then you might not need to update this for 2 whole months or 3 months from now. So it kind of just depends on the time scales that you work on and the time scales that your work is needed for. But if you have long-term tasks that need to be done, then I would still encourage you to put this on the list and just give it a really low ranking, put a deadline that's like next year so that you can keep track of it. And when the date comes closer, then you can kind of bump up the priority level. So I hope that answers your question. This is a great tool. And again, like the research diary, it is only as helpful as you make it updated. So I personally update my project task list daily, and I make sure that whatever is floating at the top is actually accurate. And I update the status. When you do this on a daily basis, in the morning or in the afternoon, it actually doesn't take that long to update. Sometimes it takes me 30 seconds. I look through the things that I'm working on right now this week, and I think, oh, yeah, no change in status. Then I don't need to update anything. Okay, so We talked about 2 project management tools to get you organized: the research diary to document your past work, the project task list to track the current status of your work. And now we're going to switch gears and talk about procrastination. So I'll share some tools to help you address 3 reasons for procrastination. None of these are perfect solutions. They may not work for everyone, but it's a step in the right direction to help you at least become more aware of what's happening and to manage your time and your actions more intentionally. So let's do a little poll to see how this group is doing. I'm going to launch it right now. It's a simple yes, no. And okay, so you should see that now. So the poll is, I have procrastinated on my work in the last 2 weeks. Doesn't matter what it is. You can think of anything that comes to mind, like, oh, yeah, I was avoiding that. That's a yes. So I'll give everyone a minute to work on this. And then I'll share the results. Okay. Another 30 seconds or so. Oh, actually, everyone has responded already. Look at that. Okay. So I'm going to end this poll and share the results. Do y'all see that? Okay. So it says 91% of you have procrastinated. Oh, that's a big majority, right? Does anyone here want to share something that they've been procrastinating on? I think a lot of us can relate to this. You can share in the chat or unmute. Writing my first paper. Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, that's a common one, not a good one, but it's a common one. Writing my first paper. And that's hard because you don't know if you're doing things right. And you don't know exactly if you're spending your time well, or you don't even know what the steps you need to take are, right? Writing my thesis literature review. Yes, that is difficult too, because there's just so much material, right? There's so much to cover, and you have to condense it down to this really tiny little thing that's supposed to capture everything while also being really concise. And that's hard. That's hard to do. Okay. So the reason I asked this is because I wanted to show everyone that basically all of us deal with this. If I expanded that poll instead of the last 2 weeks, if I said the last year, pretty sure it'd be 100%. We would be procrastinating on something. Okay, so I'm going to do another quick poll. And let's see if we all have similar response to this one. Have you ever told yourself, I'll just do it tomorrow? Not today, just do it tomorrow. Miriam says, new experiment, afraid it will not work, so I keep pushing it back in the list. Yeah, fear, right, is holding us back too from working on something that we need to do. Wow, interesting. Okay. So let me share the results of this. Do y'all see this? 100% of you. I'm not lying here. 100% of you have told yourself, I'll just do it tomorrow. Why? Why is that so prevalent among all of us? And I'll share this really fun comic that I found online from Sarah Anderson. It's present me, future me, and I'll just put it off. I'll put it off. And present me is literally running away from the work, right? And putting it off. Of the people who said yes, so everybody who said, I'll just do it tomorrow, how many of you, in fact, did not do it tomorrow? Let me know in the chat. Say me, yes, it was me, guilty. Oh, yes, me, yes, for sure. Me too. I mean, so many times, right? Not just once, but so many times. In denial, telling myself it's gonna be different tomorrow. And it never is. Okay, so I have a comment here. It's been great so far. Thank you. Have you any additional tips for ADHD folks? Okay, this is a great question. I've gotten this before. Now, I personally don't have experience with ADHD. However, I believe that all of the tools that we're talking about today, if you start them and see results, I think that's going to help you see that this is helping. It's really hard. The hardest part is not starting, actually, I think, is being consistent and making sure that you're starting only once, not starting and stopping and starting and stopping. So I'm gonna ask you guys to commit to trying all of these tools, trying the ones that are relevant to you, and trying them for a week and letting me know, email me. I'd love to hear from all of you what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and just to experiment. Because honestly, I give you these tools, but I can't know. We can never know what's going to work for you until you try it and until you really commit to trying it for a period of time where it's actually relevant, and not for doing it for like 1 hour or one day, but trying it for like a month and being consistent with it and seeing how that changes the results that you see, right? And that's the real only way to determine if it's going to be effective or not. Okay, so I see tons of examples. It's too late in the day to start something new, so I'll just do it tomorrow and forget. Now that's, yeah, haven't we told ourselves that same thing every time? Um, okay, so thank you, Joanne. I saw some questions here that you addressed. Thank you for that. So what can we do about this procrastination issue of I'll just do it tomorrow? And what I'm proposing is something called a time audit. And this is kind of a term that you may or may not have heard of. And it's something that I've done with my students, that I've done with myself. And every time it just shocks me and them how mind-blowing the difference is between us today and us tomorrow. Because we tell ourselves that tomorrow it's going to be different. We do this because we see our future selves more as strangers than as ourselves. And there's two, psychological phenomena behind this. One is called the optimism bias. It's a type of cognitive bias, which means that we believe that our future selves are more capable, patient, energetic than we are today. The other is called the planning fallacy, which means that we think future tasks are going to take less time than they actually take. I mean, how many times have we thought, oh, it's like only going to take half an hour. I'll do it tomorrow morning. And it turns out you do it and it ends up taking 3 hours. And you think back to yesterday and thought, well, I thought it was only going to take half an hour, right? And we continue to make this mistake. We don't learn from that lesson. It's just something so human in us that we don't realize the correlation that all these patterns are happening, and we just don't learn from it. So one way to address this is something called the time audit. You can use an Excel or a calendar app, a planner. All of the tools I'm giving you today don't require any fancy software or apps. All of these things you can do on paper if you wanted to, or in Excel. And the first step in a time audit is to plan and set up blocks of time for activities that you're doing in the next day or the next week. And in this case, let's say you're planning out the whole week, you're going to write what you'll be doing every hour of your workday. And maybe you don't know exactly, you'll take a guess, your best guess at what you're going to do. And you're going to avoid the temptation to schedule in the future what you wouldn't reasonably finish today. Now that's important. I'm going to say it again. Avoid the temptation to schedule in the future what you wouldn't reasonably finish today. And the second step, after you've laid out the plan for the next week, you're going to record. So keeping track of your time, how long it takes to do each task. You're just going to check 9 o'clock and write in a separate column. Next to Monday plan, you're going to write another column, Monday actual. Monday 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. record what actually happened. What did you actually get done? What did you actually do? So you can see side by side between the plan and the actual. Were you unrealistic? Did you give yourself enough time? Did you finish everything you planned? Did you feel 100% exhausted by the end of the week? That's telling you something, right? So you can reflect on that. How different is that schedule? And are you giving yourself a workflow that is sustainable, that you can keep up on the long term? Because that's really what's important. It's not enough to be doing lots of work for a week and then feeling tired for another 2 weeks and not getting much done. So repeating this exercise for the following week, now you have a week of data on yourself and you can adjust the planning for the following week. Maybe you never gave yourself a lunch break and you need to give yourself that hour time each day to take a break, have a walk, and adjust for, based on the data that you have accumulated. And doing this week to week, eventually you're going to get an idea of the pattern of what you overschedule yourself for, what you're too optimistic about, and adjust that. I'd love to hear from you after a week, after a month, and I'll share my contact information at the end of the presentation. Any questions or comments about time audits before I move on to the next tool that I have here? Okay, seeing none, let's move on and do another poll. So next poll, launching now. Have you ever told yourself, I'm still being productive, but you're doing unrelated tasks? You're doing stuff that has nothing to do with the deadline that you have on Friday. And this is not in the past 2 weeks, like ever. Have you ever done this before? Like, oh, I'll just clean, this and that. And 3 hours later, oh, I haven't made any progress yet on my work. Okay. And I'm sharing this cute comic that I found. You cleaned everything, you did all the laundry, I organized, and then you remember, wait, my paper. I didn't do anything for my paper. That's due tomorrow. Okay. Still getting responses in, so give you a few more seconds to respond to that. Responses here are a little different. Okay, minute passed. I'm gonna close the poll now and share the results. So 78% of you said, I'm still being productive while doing unrelated tasks. That means 22% of you, at least you weren't in denial, right, about what you were really doing. And can I get a volunteer to share what their unrelated task was? Kind of the most ridiculous version of it. Mine was transferring, my rice and flour from the bags to those cute containers. And I put like a label on it and it looked so organized and cute. And that's, way more important than working on my dissertation. Okay. Can I get a volunteer in here to share? Let's see. Joanne, I was procrastinating with nonprofit work. Oh, I mean, what a good reason, right? Like, I'm doing good. Joanne's like, no, it's not. Don't follow me. Exercising, which helps with mental clarity. Yes, it helps me be better while I'm working. Okay, catching up on past due cleaning. Well, I'm catching up on this other thing, and that kind of balances out, right? Okay, I'm going through my closet, so I have something to wear for my next meeting. I'm just preparing for the future, right? That's way more important than this other thing I'm avoiding. And we go through these mental gymnastics to tell ourselves, like, well, I'm still doing work and it's still important. Julian says, I sometimes go in a rabbit hole of interesting reading, even though it's not related. It's not helping me finish experiments analysis. Yes. Formatting things. Oh, yes. Making everything color coded, looking perfect. All the margins look perfectly aligned. And it looks so nice in the end, right? But it's not actually doing what we need to be doing. So how do we address this? We're going to prioritize. And by that, I have a very specific exercise for you. We don't have time to do it entirely as a group today, but you can do this on your own or in a group. And I have found it to be extremely enlightening. When we're doing a specific task, while we're putting off another task with a deadline, we're avoiding negative emotions. And maybe we have a fear of failure, or we have imposter syndrome, or we're just frustrated, right? Doing something unrelated or unimportant Or maybe it's important, but it's not urgent. That's a sign of you doing something that has no potential failure. You can't fail at cleaning. You can't fail at doing something that's above and beyond what you already would be doing. If you weren't planning to dress really nice for your next meeting, but you are now, then you're not failing at dressing well. You're going above and beyond, and that makes you feel good. There's no possibility of failure. So you pat yourself on the back for going above and beyond on cleaning or organizing. And that's avoiding the true problem, avoiding the true work that needs to be done. Really, the only way out of this is to confront the negative emotions rather than avoiding them. And that's not quick. It's not easy to do. And that's not something that we can address simply in a 1 hour workshop. I work on this with my one-on-one coaching clients, and it can take months really to identify and start to address the underlying issues. What we can do today is to make our priorities more explicit by prioritizing the tasks that need to get done and putting all of that in writing. We can no longer convince ourselves that making a perfectly coded, color-coded notebook is more important than starting the first draft. And we know deep down, that's not true, but seeing it on paper is a whole nother level of accountability. So here's the activity. Write down 25 goals that you have for your PhD. Now, if you're just getting started, 25 might not be enough. If you're at the end of your PhD, maybe you don't even have 25. That's fine. Just get specific. Lay out everything. And if you have more than 25, just keep it to the top 25 that you can think of. And the second step is to rank them in order from 1 to 25. Number 1 being the highest priority item. That can mean a combination of importance, urgency, timing. Maybe the goal starts really early. The priority is high because it takes a long time, so you have to start early. You have field work that you need to plan a year ahead. Maybe the goal is a really quick one, but it needs to be done as soon as possible. And step 3 is the hardest part because you're going to circle the top 3 ranked items and focus your attention on those. Now, there are some things that are not in your top 3 that you just can't ignore. Your rats need food. Your advisor needs you to teach a class. Okay, that's fine. But outside of those required commitments, when you have the flexibility and freedom to decide what you're working on, go back to the list. Go back to the top 3. Focus on those. And when you have a decision to make about what to do next, look at the top 3 and take the next step. And this is how you can pair these tools together, because your top 3 should align with your project task list. That priority A, the top priority, those should be floating to the top. And so those top 3 priorities should be at the top of your project task list. Should be easy for you to see what needs to be done next. And you just take the next step. And this activity, really, it could be a separate workshop all on its own. So if you're interested in a follow-up workshop, goes into more detail, doing this together, or doing any of the other activities that I've mentioned, make sure you mention it in the post-workshop survey. That really helps us to figure out what students need and want from these workshops. What we're doing today is an overview. You're going to have lots of activities and material to bring home with you, but if there's anything you feel like, well, I had a lot more follow-up questions, let us know and we'll try to make it happen. So questions on this before I move on the prioritizing task. Bianca, I feel so called out right now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but it needs to be done. Someone had to do it, and it's going to be me. So any questions so far before I move on? What about LinkedIn goals? Hard to rearrange. Perfect. I'm glad you asked this. I actually have an example later on about LinkedIn. So I'm gonna pause on this question and we're gonna talk about it. If you still have a question about it, feel free to bring it up again, but I am gonna get to LinkedIn specifically as an example.
May
Okay.
I clarify? I think she meant linked goals, like things that are together,
Oh,
paired.
I'm sorry. I thought I read LinkedIn. Okay. Linked goals, hard to rearrange. That's true. And I think if you have a task that is dependent on something else, then order it in chronological order or the order that needs to be done. or the order that you think is most important. And it's not a perfect science, right? Prioritizing is usually going to be muddy. So maybe your top number 3 and number 4 are really the same thing. But that's where the project task list comes in, because then you know that you need to break it down into the next step. So what is really the next step in these 3 goals that are all linked together? And that's really going to be where you take action on it. This is kind of like an overview, like the goals that you want to have. You want to publish a paper, you want to contribute, be a co-author on a paper. Well, those are somewhat related because you might be doing the same research, but you're just not getting to the same goal. You might be getting to one before the other, and you don't know which one it is. But the next step is to do the next step for your research and not to be relabeling stuff in your kitchen. That's kind of the point of this exercise. Thanks, Joanne. I misread that totally. Okay, so the next step is showing you another task. So I'm going to do another poll here. Number 4. Have you ever told yourself it's impossible to do it all? Like, I just can't. There's too much to do, and there's not enough time. I don't have enough energy. I don't have enough hours in the day to be working on this right now, and I just can't. So I just don't. I just don't engage. Burned out, yeah, for sure. And I see we have responses coming in. 79% of you said that it's impossible to do it all. That shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't have so much work that it's impossible to do it all. And, part of this is academia. We can't change academia as a whole. And so we have to do what we can to address all of this pressure. There's a lot of pressure to get stuff done now, and we don't know where to start. So we just freeze. We have to take the first step. And we do that by starting out very, very small. And once you do that, you can see that it's not as bad as you imagined. And the next step is going to get easier. Now, there may be a task that gives you a lot of anxiety, and that's okay, because we're going to do an activity that helps with this. And I'm going to explain the steps, share an example, and then we're going to do the activity together. So the next exercise that I'm showing you here is listing a task that you're procrastinating on right now. Like right now. Or something that you think you're going to procrastinate on in the future if the time hasn't come yet. So keep that in your mind. Write it down on a piece of paper. We're going to list the 5 steps that you need to take in order to do this task. And if there's only 3 steps, write 3 steps. And lastly, we're going to focus just on step 1 of those 3 or 5 and break that down into smaller subtasks individually that are easier to handle so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. I have an example table for you if you want to copy this or emulate this on your screen. These subtasks are going to be super, super simple. They should be so easy that you're going to laugh at them. And I'm going to show you this example on the next slide. So this is going to be a real world example. I worked with a student who was very, very hesitant about creating a LinkedIn profile. They were graduating soon. They were looking for jobs. They wanted their LinkedIn to be filled out, but they just procrastinated on it for months. And they weren't comfortable with social media. They were worried, oh, I'm going to write something stupid. They're going to think I'm stupid and I won't get the job. All of these thoughts made it really hard for them to do this task of updating a LinkedIn profile. And they were just overwhelmed whenever they thought about it. So the first step that we have them do is to break down the task. And so the task here that I'm showing you is as simple as this: entering your job title. And the subtasks are 1 through 7 here I'm showing you. Super brief and easy. Here we go. Logging into a computer. I can do that. I've done that a million times. Open a browser. I've done that as well. It's easy. Going to linkedin.com. Okay, that might be a little scary because the homepage has a lot of posts from people who are bragging about how successful they are. And maybe you have notifications and messages, but you have to stay focused, right? Follow the list. The list is what's going to guide you. Ignore that other stuff. Click on your profile, scroll to the experience section, click on edit title, and type the job title, graduate, student, researcher, and click save. And so you can see these steps are very, very small. Individually, they're not so scary. They're not so overwhelming. They don't feel impossible. And in this example, a student that I had do this, they wrote down the subtasks, not just for the first step, these 7, but for every step, more than 30 in this big list. And one day they decided, okay, I've been staring at this list for a few weeks now. They decided to get started. I can log into my computer. I can type in linkedin.com. So they started doing that, following a list. And then they realized it was really easy. And they ended up doing it all, not just the list on this slide, but every step. They took the first small step and ended up finishing the entire LinkedIn profile in half an hour. And that was amazing. I'm not guaranteeing that you're going to get these results, but what I can do is say that having the list is going to set you up for success, because then it's staring you in the face. It's telling you, I'm not impossible, right? And that's something that we're doing to separate the thinking from the doing. And that sometimes that's all you need to do to really get started and to not freeze up whenever you think about a task that you're procrastinating on. I have a comment question from JT. You're so right. My biggest challenge is that I could not estimate the time required for many tasks. For example, summarizing model results in my advisors, I should take no more than a week, but actually took me a year. Any suggestions on duration estimation? Okay, this is perfect. Thank you, JT, for bringing this up. And you bring up another great comment, which is your advisor is hand waving and saying, oh, it's fine. You'll get it done. It's going to take 2 hours. And it takes you a month, and then you feel bad about yourself. But what you have to remember is that it takes your advisor 2 hours because they've been doing this for 20 years. So it actually took them 20 years and 2 hours. And you haven't had that experience, right? So you need to give yourself a break, because not only are you doing the task, you're learning how to do the task. And the learning takes a lot longer for a beginner than someone who's an expert and doing it for the millionth time. So you can't judge yourself based on what other people have done with this duration. And sometimes that requires a conversation with your advisor to kind of remind them, like, when I get really good at this, I know it's going to go quicker, but I really want to take my time and make sure that I'm doing this right. And so I need a little bit more time than we originally discussed. And these are the kind of conversations that I have with my one-on-one clients, because sometimes their advisors have wildly unrealistic goals for them, right? Saying like, oh, by the end of the month, you should have a draft of this paper. And they haven't even started yet. And for them, maybe they can crank out a paper and voila, it's there. But for you, and you've never written anything like this before, you're going to need maybe a year and a half to create this draft. And that's just part of the experience. For you, when you write this list of subtasks, it's up to you to estimate. And, like we talked about before, we have this planning fallacy. We think it's not actually going to take that long. Well, you might be right, you might be wrong, but having this on paper is going to show you, is going to tell you that you were right or wrong, right? It's not going to be about your perception about, oh, I should have done this as quickly as my advisor did. So that's going to be, your own version of iterating on this, is understanding how much time do I need to do these tasks. And yes, Joanne has a great point. Anticipating twice as long. That's another point that I should mention, is when I suggested this activity to my student, I said, put down the duration as 3 times longer than you actually need. So here I put 5 seconds for opening a browser. It doesn't actually take that long. Unless you have very slow internet. But you could triple these and say each task takes 15 seconds. Okay, that's fine. But at least you have something that is on the order of magnitude that doesn't feel impossible. And that's the goal here. All right. So let's do this together. I'm going to give you all about 5 minutes to work on this activity, and then we're going to come back as a group to debrief. And in the meantime, if there's any questions, feel free to put your questions in the chat. Grab a pencil, pen, open an Excel sheet. Think about a task that you're overwhelmed by right now, that you're procrastinating on. All right. And do the activity. So I'll show this slide, and I'll give you 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll wrap up. All right, so I've got some comments here saying that because breaking down to subtasks makes the list longer, it's discouraging because it seems like there's so many more things to do. And that's true when it's something that is really big. Now, the key difference here, I think, is that a task is different from a project. So a project is something like writing my first paper or finishing this lit review. That's a whole set of tasks. That's a whole universe of tasks that are nested within a project. When I say task, I mean something that has a foreseeable end that you can check off and say, yeah, I did it today, or I did it this week. So if you're writing your first paper, for example, the task that you're discussing might be something like create a table of 20 papers for my references. And that in itself has work that needs to be done, but it's not something that's going to take a year to happen, or maybe even it might not take a month. It depends on what you're defining as your task. So if it's something as minor as in the example I gave, enter job title, that's one step. And the task was filling out a LinkedIn profile. The project was getting a job, right? If I tried to break down the subtasks for getting a job, it would be like a million lines long, and that's discouraging. But it's nesting and breaking down the tasks and focusing just on what needs to happen now. And yeah, if you did do the subtask for a huge list, it's overwhelming to look at, but you don't have to make subtasks for all of those things. The example I gave was subtasks that my student did, and the time it took to do everything was actually less than half an hour. But it looks like a lot just because it's split up so much. So I would suggest if you feel like it's too long of a list, then the task is actually more than one task, if that makes sense. So JT, I hope that helps. And defining these things is not easy. That's part of what I do when I work with students is we iterate on these, right? These are examples to get you started and to get you thinking. But sometimes when you implement, it's like, oh, I don't know if this was that helpful. And then you can tweak it to make it more helpful for you. So can I get a volunteer to share this activity for you? Does the task still feel scary? Is there anything in the subtask that anyone wants to share as, like, I can do the first subtask. That feels easy to me. Get someone to share. I'm going to start calling names if I don't see any chat messages. So I'll call out a few names. Any one of you can share. Say Harrison, Hunter, and Paulus. Any one of you want to share one of your subtasks or how this activity was for you?
Yeah, I guess I can share.
Sure, thank you.
So yeah, recently I was working on a fellowship application, and to I guess I kind of just mapped out like what I could have done better. So like one of my subtasks was kind of like to create a benchmark, yeah, of like each day rather than like kind of just improvise one at a time. So like, I guess like just word vomiting every day, like making sure I do that. Yeah, I think that was like one of my subtasks. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And I hope that each of the subtasks that you create is individually not scary to you, because that's the whole goal, right? Is to make it approachable so that when you go to do your work, you don't have to think about what you need to do and the work doesn't feel so scary. It might be a lot, like you might have a lot of work to do, but I mean, that's a PhD, right? It's a lot of work. So thank you for sharing. And I'm going to go to the Q&A section now. I realize it is at 1 o'clock, so anyone needs to leave, feel free, but I'm going to stay around as long as there are questions. And there's a link to a post survey here, and you can use the QR code as well. If you can fill that out by the end of this week, on Monday, I'm going to do a random drawing for a $20 Amazon gift card. So make sure you send in your results. This is really going to help us with understanding what you'd like out of future workshops and how this workshop was for you. Thank you, Joanne, for sharing that. And Joanne, if you could also link the survey link. I'm not sure if that's what's on here. Is that
Yep.
Okay, great. So Joanne's first link, the post-workshop survey, is what you can fill out. You don't have to finish it today, but by Monday, you'll be in the running for the survey. And I am free here to take questions. And I wanted to say thank you for everyone who's attending and volunteering and participating. I really hope that this was helpful for you. And thank you to Joanne. We couldn't do this without you. If you want to know more about what I do, my website is on the screen, and Joanne has also linked my contact information and my website. Okay, thank you for attending. Okay, so I'm gonna take questions now based on the chat.